What if every bank ledger carried two stories, one written for the law and one written in secret with a dead man's heart? Which one would you dare to tell? The courthouse bell struck 9 when Emma Hartwell turned the brass key in the Millfield Savings and Loan door for the last time as owner. Through the tall windows, morning light caught the dust motes dancing above her father's oak desk, where the leather ledger sat, like a judgment waiting to be read. She had inherited more than a bank 3 weeks ago. She had inherited every secret her father kept, every debt he forgave, every family he saved, from ruin by marking paid, in full, in his careful script, while his own accounts dwindled. The ledger told a story. The town didn't know how Samuel Hartwell had quietly kept half of Millfield from starving through 2 harsh winters and a failed corn crop. Emma opened the ledger to the ribbon marker, her finger finding the entry that made her chest tight. Morrison family, $847.50. Drought relief, status, forgiven, Shah. Below it, in different ink, property transfer pending. E.H. The Morrison Farm. 60 acres of the best wheat land in the county, and according to the bank's official records, they owed every cent. According to her father's private notations, they owed nothing at all. Miss Hartwell? She startled, closing the ledger. Through the glass door stood a man she didn't recognize, tall, weathered, with saddlebags slung over his shoulder and the particular stillness of someone who listened before he spoke. Emma unlocked the door. "We open at 10? Mr. Cole Brennan. Got word you might be selling. The bank isn't for sale." "Not the bank, the Morrison place. Heard it might be going to auction next week." He stepped inside, his boots quiet on the polished floor. "Like to make an offer first, if you're willing." Emma felt the ledger's weight against her hip where she'd tucked it. The Morrisons didn't know their debt had been forgiven. They'd left for California 2 days ago, believing they'd lost everything. The property requires significant back payments. How significant? $847, plus interest. Cole reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small canvas pouch. It clinked when he set it on the counter. "Count it." Emma stared at the pouch. No one in Millfield had that kind of ready cash, not anymore. "Mr. Brennan, might I ask what brings you to our town? Looking for a place to settle?" Heard Millfield had good soil and honest people. His grey eyes met hers. Was I misinformed? The courthouse bell chimed the quarter hour. Emma picked up the pouch. It was heavier than it looked. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Chen setting up her vegetable cart, the same spot where she'd sold turnips and beans since the railroad came through. Honest people. The question cut deeper than Cole could know. "I'll need to verify the exact amount owed," she said. "Can you return this afternoon?" "Fair enough." Cole touched his hat brim. 3 o'clock suit you?" After he left, Emma spread the contents of the pouch across her father's desk. Mostly double eagles, some silver dollars, all clean and new. Exactly $847. She opened the ledger again, this time to the front pages where her father had written his banking philosophy in faded blue ink. A ledger tells 2 stories: what was loaned and what was learned. The second story matters more. Emma closed the book and walked to the window. The Morrison farm lay 3 miles north, empty now except for the wind moving through unharvested wheat. In 2 hours, she would have to choose which story to tell Cole Brennan, the official one, where the Morrisons owed everything and lost it all, or the real one, where her father had given away so much he'd left his daughter a bank with empty vaults and a heart full of other people's gratitude. The clock on the wall ticked toward noon, each second carrying her closer to a choice that would define who she was. Samuel Hartwell's daughter, or Emma Hartwell, banker. She picked up her pen and opened the ledger to a fresh page. The stage from Millfield to Granger's Crossing left at 1:30, which gave Emma 30 minutes to walk to the Morrison farm and back before Cole returned. She needed to see the property with her own eyes, needed to understand what her father thought was worth $847 in secret charity. The road north followed Willow Creek, past the schoolhouse where Miss Patterson was hanging primers on the line to dry, past the Kowalski homestead where smoke rose from the Soddy's chimney in a thin grey line. Emma had walked this route countless times as a child, but never as a woman holding her family's reputation in a leather ledger tucked under her arm. The Morrison place sat in a natural bowl between two low hills. The farmhouse small but well built, the barn solid. What struck Emma was how ready it looked, not abandoned, but waiting. The wheat in the near field had grown tall and golden, unharvested, but not yet falling to seed. Someone could still bring in a decent crop if they moved fast. Emma opened the gate and walked to the front porch. A wooden crate sat beside the door, and inside she found a folded paper with her name on it, in Mrs. Morrison's careful handwriting. Miss Emma, we couldn't bear to face your father's debt, so we're heading west. The wheat's ready if someone wants to harvest it. There's $40 hidden in the flour, tin in the kitchen, not much, but it's honest money. Please tell your father we never meant to take advantage of his kindness. Mary Morrison. Emma sat on the porch steps and opened the ledger. Her father's entries about the Morrisons went back 4 years, through the drought, through John Morrison's broken leg that kept him from the harvest, through Mary's difficult birth that required Dr. Hendricks to come twice from Granger's Crossing. Each time, when the Morrisons couldn't pay, her father had marked the debt deferred in the public records and forgiven in his private notes. The courthouse bell was striking 2 when Emma heard hoofbeats on the road. Cole Brennan approached on a sorrel gelding, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. He dismounted at the gate and walked up the path, his eyes taking in the wheat field, the solid barn, the well-maintained fences. Good land, he said. Yes, it is. Emma stood, brushing dust from her dark blue dress. Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you something. Ask away. Are you planning to farm this land yourself, or are you buying it to sell? Cole was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the gatepost. Why does it matter? Because this farm has a history. The people who worked it cared about more than just the money. So do I. He opened the gate and stepped into the yard. Miss Hartwell, can I speak plainly? I wish you would. I've been farming other men's land for 15 years. Sharecropping, mostly, down in Kansas and Nebraska. Saved every dollar I could, looking for a place to call home. He gestured toward the wheat field. This looks like that place. Emma felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening. The previous owners were good people who fell on hard times. Most good people do, sooner or later. Cole's voice was gentle. Question is, what happens next? What do you mean? Well, if someone was to buy this place and bring in that wheat crop, seems only right they'd share the proceeds with the family that planted it. Send them their portion, wherever they ended up. Emma stared at him. You'd do that? Wouldn't you? The afternoon sun was warm on Emma's shoulders, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the whistle of the eastbound train. In her ledger, her father had written, "The Morrison family represents the best of what we're trying to build here." Emma opened the ledger to a fresh page and wrote, Morrison Property. C. Brennan, $847. Terms. Cash purchase with harvest proceeds to be forwarded to previous owners, E.H.T. Mr. Brennan, she said. I believe we have an agreement. Cole smiled, and for the first time since her father died, Emma felt like she was carrying on his work instead of just cleaning up after it. They shook hands in the Morrisons' front yard, the wheat field golden around them, and Emma realized she was no longer just Samuel Hartwell's daughter. She was a banker in her own right, and she was learning to write her own story in the ledger's pages. Emma and Cole walked through the Morrison house together, Emma pointing out the solid craftsmanship, Cole running his hands over the windowsills and door frames with the appreciation of someone who understood good work. In the kitchen, Emma found the flour tin Mrs. Morrison had mentioned, and sure enough, $40 in silver certificates lay folded beneath the white dust. This should go to the Morrisons too, Emma said. Cole nodded. Add it to the crop money. They were standing in the front room when Emma noticed Cole looking at something on the mantelpiece, a small framed photograph of the Morrison family standing in front of their newly built barn. John Morrison held his infant son, Mary Morrison stood beside him, and both parents looked directly into the camera with the quiet pride of people who had built something with their own hands. That's what I want, Cole said softly. A photograph? A place where someone might want to take my picture. He turned to Emma. Miss Hartwell, can I ask you something now? Of course. Why didn't you just tell me the debt was already forgiven? Would have saved us both some trouble. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd been caught. and they both knew it. Because I needed to know what kind of man you were first, and the kind who'd send crop money to people he's never met. Emma closed the ledger and held it against her chest. The kind my father would have trusted. Cole was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. Your father sounds like he was a good banker. He was a terrible banker. He gave away more money than he kept. Emma's voice caught, but he was a good man. Sometimes that's the same thing. They were interrupted by the sound of a wagon on the road. Through the window, Emma could see Sheriff Watson driving up to the gate, his deputy beside him. Emma's stomach dropped. Sheriff Watson had been asking questions about the bank's books, about whether Samuel Hartwell had been following proper procedures in his lending. Miss Hartwell, the sheriff called from the wagon. Need to have a word with you. Emma and Cole walked out to meet him. Sheriff Watson was a big man with a grey moustache and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. His deputy, young Tom Carlyle, had his hand resting near his gun belt. Afternoon, Sheriff. Emma's voice was steady. What brings you out here? Got a complaint filed this morning. Someone saying your father made improper loans, didn't follow banking regulations. Watson's eyes moved to Cole, then back to Emma. Need to take a look at your lending records. Emma felt the ledger's weight in her hands. The real story of her father's banking was written in these pages. But so was the evidence that could destroy his reputation and hers. What kind of complaint? Anonymous letter. Claims. Samuel Hartwell was forgiving debts without proper collateral, operating outside state banking laws. Watson climbed down from the wagon. You know anything about that? Emma looked at Cole, then back at the sheriff. 3 miles away, in the bank vault, sat the official ledgers that showed every loan properly documented, every debt accounted for according to the law. But here in her hands was the truth that her father had chosen compassion over regulation, people over profit. Sheriff, she said carefully, my father kept meticulous records. Every transaction was properly documented. Then you won't mind showing me the books. Of course not, but I should mention that we're in the process of transferring this property to Mr. Brennan here. All legal and properly filed. Sheriff Watson looked at Cole with new interest. You're buying the Morrison place? Cash purchase, Cole said. Miss Hartwell's been most helpful with the paperwork. Glad to hear it. The Morrisons were good people. Watson turned back to Emma. I'll need to see those ledgers tomorrow morning, Miss Hartwell. All of them. After the sheriff left, Emma and Cole stood in the Morrisons' yard as the sun began to sink toward the western hills. Emma knew she had until morning to decide what story she would tell, the official one that would protect her father's reputation, or the real one that revealed his heart. Mr. Brennan, she said finally, would you like to come to dinner tonight? I find I could use some advice from someone who understands the value of good land and honest work. Cole touched his hat brim. I'd be honored, Miss Hartwell. As they walked back toward town, Emma realized she was no longer walking alone. For the first time since her father died, she had found someone who understood the weight of carrying other people's stories, and the courage it took to decide which ones deserved to be told. Emma's house on Maple Street felt different that night. For the first time in weeks, she set 2 plates instead of 1, her mother's china catching the lamplight. Cole arrived, cleaned up, a shy smile on his face, a handful of wildflowers in hand. Over fried chicken and cornbread, Emma spoke of her father, not the banker, but the man who read stories on the porch, swing, and taught her to name birds by their songs. He sounds like he raised a fine daughter, Cole said. He raised me to think for myself, Emma replied. Which now feels both a blessing and a curse. After supper, they sat outside, the ledger between them like a third guest. Cole read her father's lines slowly. A ledger tells 2 stories, what was loaned and what was learned. The second story matters more. He turned the pages, seeing names and quiet generosities. Emma, he said softly, he didn't just leave you debts. He left you a map to who you want to be. Emma felt something in her chest loosen, as if a knot had finally come undone. Tomorrow she would show Sheriff Watson both ledgers, the official one that satisfied the law and the private one that revealed the heart. She would tell him that Samuel Hartwell had been both a careful banker and a generous man, and that sometimes the two had been in conflict. She would let the town decide which story mattered more. There's something else, Emma said. The bank is deeper in debt than I've let on. Even with proper management, I'm not sure I can keep it solvent. What will you do? I don't know. Sell it, maybe. Or close it, and let Granger's Crossing handle Millfield's banking. Cole was quiet for a moment. What if you had a partner, someone with a little capital and a lot of respect for what your father was trying to do? Emma looked at him. Are you offering? I'm thinking about it. I came here looking for a place to farm, but maybe I found something else. Maybe I found a place where a banker and a farmer could work together, where someone with good land and someone with good books could build something neither one of them could build alone. The evening star was bright above the grain elevator, and somewhere in the distance a night bird was calling. Emma thought about her father's empty vault and full heart, about the Morrison wheat waiting to be harvested, about all the stories written in the ledger's pages that were still unfolding. Mr. Cole Brennan, she said, I believe you just proposed to me. Cole laughed. Miss Emma Hartwell, I believe I did, though I should probably ask about your dowry first. Emma opened the ledger to the last page, where her father had written his final entry the day before he died. Everything I have, love and trust, paid in full. One ledger, she said, full of other people's stories, and the chance to write some new ones. Cole squeezed her hand. I can't think of a better dowry than that. Sheriff Watson arrived at the bank the next morning with Deputy Carlyle and a man Emma didn't recognize. Thin, well-dressed, with the kind of pale hands that had never held a plough. The stranger introduced himself as Mr. Aldrich from the State Banking Commission, sent to investigate irregularities in Millfield savings and loans lending practices. His voice was clipped, official. Depending on what we find, Miss Hartwell, the Commission has authority to freeze your accounts and suspend the bank's charter within 24 hours. Emma had spent the early morning hours preparing. Both ledgers sat on her father's desk, the official record that showed every loan properly documented according to state banking law, and her father's private ledger that revealed the heart behind the business. She had also prepared a third document, a complete financial statement showing the bank's current position, signed by both her and Cole as her proposed business partner. Gentlemen, Emma said, gesturing to the chairs she'd arranged, thank you for coming. I believe I can address your concerns completely. Sheriff Watson looked surprised. He'd clearly expected a defensive, frightened young woman, not someone who spoke with the confidence of a person who had already made her decision. Miss Hartwell, Aldrich began, we've received serious allegations about improper lending practices, loans made without adequate collateral, debts forgiven without proper documentation, possible violations of state banking regulations. Who made these allegations? Emma asked. The complaint was anonymous. Emma opened the official ledger. This contains every loan made by Millfield Savings and Loan during my father's tenure. Every transaction is properly documented, every piece of collateral recorded, every payment schedule clearly defined. You're welcome to examine it. Aldrich spent 20 minutes going through the records, his trained eye checking dates, amounts, signatures. Finally, he looked up. These records appear to be in order. Yes, they are. My father was scrupulous about following state banking regulations. Emma paused. However, he was also a human being who cared about his community. She opened her father's private ledger. This is the second story. Emma watched Aldrich's face change as he read her father's private notations. The Morrison debt marked forgiven, while the official records showed satisfied. The Patterson mortgage, quietly assumed by the bank when her husband died. The Kowalski seed loan, repaid in vegetables when cash wasn't available. Miss Hartwell, Aldrich said carefully, these private forgivenesses, they represent significant losses to the bank. Yes, they do. Losses that may have affected the bank's solvency. They did affect the bank's solvency. Which is why I'm proposing a solution. Emma placed the third document on the desk. Mr. Cole Brennan has agreed to become a partner in the bank, bringing sufficient capital to restore our reserves. In addition, we're implementing a new community lending program that will formalize what my father was doing informally, providing assistance to local families during difficult times with appropriate documentation and oversight. Sheriff Watson leaned forward. Emma, are you sure about this? I'm sure about continuing my father's work, just more transparently. Emma looked at each man in turn. My father believed that a bank should serve its community, not the other way around. He may have bent some rules, but he never broke any laws, and he never took a penny that wasn't rightfully his. Aldrich closed both ledgers. Miss Hartwell, what your father did was irregular, but not illegal. And if Mr. Brennan is willing to capitalize the bank sufficiently. The door opened, and Cole entered with Dr. Hendricks, Miss Patterson, and Mr. Kowalski. Emma had asked them to come, knowing this moment would require witnesses from the community her father had served. Gentlemen, Dr. Hendricks said, I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but we heard there were questions about Sam Hartwell's character. This is highly irregular, Aldrich began. So was Sam Hartwell forgiving my mortgage when my husband died, Miss Patterson interrupted. Irregular and decent. Mr. Kowalski stepped forward, his hat in his hands. Mr. Sheriff, Mr. Banking Man, I show you something. He pulled out a promissory note, carefully folded. Sam Hartwell. He loaned me money for seed when drought come. Note says I owe $50. But when harvest come good, I try to pay him $100 because crop's so good. You know what he say? Aldrich shook his head. He say, Kowalski, note says $50, you pay $50. But you remember this kindness, and you pass it on. That was Sam Hartwell. Dr. Hendricks nodded. Sheriff Watson, you've lived in this town long enough to know what Sam Hartwell meant to this community. If there were irregularities in his banking, they were irregularities of the heart. Emma stood and walked to the window that looked out on Main Street. Mrs. Chen was setting up her vegetable cart. Children were walking to school, their lunch pails swinging. The morning stage was preparing to leave, dust swirling behind the horses. Mr. Aldrich, Emma said without turning around. My father once wrote that a ledger tells two stories, what was loaned and what was learned. I've learned that sometimes the most important transactions can't be recorded in official books. They can only be measured by the health of a community, the security of its families, the hope in its children's eyes. She turned back to face the room. I'm prepared to continue operating this bank according to both state regulations and community needs. With Mr. Brennan's partnership, we'll have sufficient capital and clear documentation. What we won't have is apology for putting people before profit. Aldrich looked at Sheriff Watson, who shrugged. Emma's right about her father, and she's right about this community. If she's found a way to keep the bank operating legally and keep serving the people who need it, I'd call that a pretty good solution. Very well, Aldrich said, closing his case. Miss Hartwell, I'll file a report stating that while your father's methods were unorthodox, no laws were violated. The bank will remain under state supervision for 6 months, but assuming Mr. Brennan's partnership is properly documented, I see no reason why you can't continue operating. After the officials left, Emma stood in the quiet bank with her neighbors and her new partner. The ledger lay open on the desk, her father's words still visible in faded ink. The second story matters more. Well, Cole said, shall we get back to work? Emma smiled and picked up her pen. On a fresh page in the ledger, she wrote, Millfield Savings and Loan, New Partnership, C. Brennan, and E. Hartwell Investment, Trust, Capital, and Commitment to Community, Terms, Indefinite, Status, Beginning. Outside, the courthouse bell struck 10. The bank was open for business. And Emma Hartwell had learned that the most important thing her father left her wasn't a building or a vault full of money, but a way of seeing the world where other people's stories mattered as much as the numbers in the ledger. 6 months later, Emma stood in the Morrison wheat field with Cole, watching the new owners, a young German couple named Heinrich and Greta Mueller, bringing in their first harvest. The Mullers had bought the farm from Cole at cost, with the understanding that they would continue sending a portion of each crop's proceeds to the Morrison family in California. It was, Emma reflected, exactly the kind of arrangement her father would have loved, complex in its kindness, simple in its fairness. The bank was thriving under the new partnership. Cole had brought not only capital, but a farmer's understanding of seasonal cash flow, of when to extend credit and when to require payment. Together, they had formalized the community lending program, creating a system that satisfied state regulators while preserving the spirit of her father's generosity. Emma carried her father's ledger with her still, though now it was joined by new volumes that recorded the ongoing stories of Millfield's families. The Chen family had expanded their vegetable business. The Kowalskis had added a dairy cow. Miss Patterson was planning to remarry a widowed rancher from the next county who courted her with wildflowers and poetry. Emma, Cole said, interrupting her thoughts, there's something I need to show you. He led her to the Morrison house, now bright with fresh paint and Greta Muller's flower boxes. On the front porch sat a wooden crate, and inside Emma found a familiar object, the framed photograph of the Morrison family that had once sat on the mantelpiece. It came with a letter, Cole said, handing her an envelope. Dear Miss Hartwell and Mr. Brennan, California is good to us, but we wanted you to have this picture for the new family. John says, tell you the wheat looks strong from here, and I say, tell you thank you for making sure our story had a proper ending. We hear you two wrote yourselves into it, which seems exactly right. With gratitude, Mary Morrison. P.S. The baby took his first steps in a California orange grove. Some stories keep growing, no matter where you plant them. Emma laughed, tears blurring her vision. Cole put his arm around her shoulders, and together they looked out over the golden wheat field where Heinrich Müller was guiding his team of horses, bringing in a harvest planted by other hands, but tended by a whole community. Your father was right, Cole said softly. The second story does matter more. Emma opened the ledger one more time to the very last page. Below her father's final entry, she wrote, the story continues. E.H. and C.B., partners in all things, paid forward in hope. The courthouse bell rang the hour. Mrs. Chen called to her children, and somewhere in the distance the evening train whistle echoed across the prairie. Emma closed the ledger and took her husband's hand, ready to walk home together through the town her father had helped build, one story at a time. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.